Welcome back to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we explore the edges of human potential, mind, body, spirit, and science. I'm your host, Dr. Nirvani, and today we're diving into something that might just change the way you think about your emotions and your face. Today, we're going to talk about how Botox not only affects your muscles, but according to a new study in the scientific journal Nature, could actually be affecting your brain. Botox is short for botulinum toxin type A. And this is a neurotoxin that is produced by a bacterium by the name of Clostridium botulinum. And it's actually the same toxin that causes botulism, which is a severe form of food poisoning. Now, when Botox is administered in controlled medicalized doses, it has a different effect on the body, and it is oftentimes injected and used into specific muscles to block nerve signals so that those muscles no longer contract or become temporarily paralyzed. And this can result in temporary paralysis that lasts anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on the muscle and depending on the person. So cosmetically, it's used to soften wrinkles and relax the muscles of facial expression, and especially in the glabellar region, which is the area between your eyebrows. The muscles in that area, when they contract over a long enough period of time, people tend to develop these 11 lines, and Botox is used quite often to soften the look of those lines that can become deeply set. But here's the thing. Botox is not just skin deep. And it turns out that it may actually be changing the way our brain processes emotion. So in this new study that was published in Nature, which is one of the most prestigious scientific journals on the planet, it's been shown that Botox injections can actually change, or modulate was the word that they used, but change brain activity. So the name of the study is called Modulation of Amygdala Activity for Emotional Faces Due to Botulinum Toxin Type A Injections that Prevent Frowning. And the amygdala is an important part of the brain, and I'll dive into that in just a little bit. But today I want to break down and explain what this means, what the study means, and importantly, talk about what the implications are for anyone who is currently using, has used, or is considering using Botox injectables. And the implications are not just physical, but also for emotional regulation and well-being. So let's start with the basics. In this study, researchers blocked an area using Botox or botulinum toxin type A in the glabellar region. So once again, this area here between the eyebrows. And this was to prevent frowning and the movement or the downward movement of the eyebrows. Not only does this affect this particular area and the muscles in it, but it also interferes with or changes an intricate feedback pattern that is necessary for our emotional processing of other people's emotions in the brain. And particularly the amygdala was the area that was studied in this particular paper. And this area is deeply involved in our ability to perceive fear, threat, anger, these types of heavier emotions. And what researchers discovered was when Botox was used to prevent people from frowning, their amygdala activity changed, specifically when viewing other people's emotional faces. And what was done was the researchers of the study used fMRI scans to evaluate what was happening in the brains of the participants of the study. And they found that when the muscles in this glabellar region were paralyzed from Botox, the amygdala of the people who had received the Botox responded less intensely to negative emotional expressions. So in the study, the women who received the Botox were shown photos of people's faces, And the fMRI registered what kind of activity was happening in their brain as a result of seeing photos of emotional faces. So when the women with Botox were viewing people who had angry faces, as an example, the amygdala's registering of that particular emotion was not as intense as it was in people who did not have Botox. So when you can't frown, your brain doesn't react as strongly as it normally would to other people's emotional distress. This supports the hypothesis called the facial feedback hypothesis, which suggests that the expressions we make with our face actually send feedback to our brain. And this shapes our own emotional experience. This idea has been around for a long time, and it is the reason that if you've ever heard this idea that when you smile, or even if you fake smile, it improves your mood and you actually sound happier, it's due to this hypothesis. Now we know that interrupting the ability to frown and to move these muscles here that are intricately responsible for frowning actually dials down the brain's ability to sense and respond to threat sensitivity. Secondly, the amygdala plays a very critical role in conditions like anxiety, depression, PTSD. And this research paper hints at the possibility that Botox could actually have a therapeutic implication here, not just a cosmetic one. And some past studies have also suggested that Botox could potentially help with depression. And this study is providing a biological mechanism as to why. By weakening the feedback loop between the negative facial expression and emotional processing of these negative faces, Botox literally reduces the brain's ability to sense that negative emotion in other people. Now, I want to pause here for a second because I think it's worth asking a deeper question. One of the suggestions was that Botox could be injected into people to dampen their depression or their response to negative emotion so that they do not feel as sad or as depressed. So it could be used therapeutically to block how the brain actually senses and responds to negativity or negative emotion. But I want to ask, is this a good thing? On the one hand, the idea that we could reduce anxiety or the reactivity to negative emotion on its surface sounds like a good idea. But is the right way to go about that paralyzing our face and then rewiring how the brain actually functions so that it's no longer capable of processing negative emotion in the way that it normally should? What are we actually interrupting when we're using Botox? What are we bypassing? Our faces are one of the primary ways that we connect and empathize with other people and signal our presence and our responsiveness. And the ability to frown isn't just about you. It's actually part of a nonverbal emotional language that we share with other people. Some research has shown that heavy Botox use can actually reduce the ability to read emotions accurately in other people. So that when you have prolonged use of this particular paralytic agent and you've frozen these muscles and you've interfered for long enough with these feedback mechanisms that allow the brain to register emotions and process them properly, you lose the ability to do so. You're just not able to understand, process, and receive other people's emotions in the same way. And just because you're not reacting as strongly to these emotions doesn't mean that they're gone, doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means that you've been sort of dulled down or the sensation of the emotion itself has been muted within your brain. It's been redirected or blocked or suppressed, and you're just not able to sense it. Not that it's not present. So while this study is interesting, I come back to this idea that technology and quote unquote therapeutic interventions should support our inner work and our inner development and shouldn't replace normal, natural human functioning. So the big picture in this is that this study opens the door to a new understanding of how embodied we actually are. And it confirms that our mind and our body are linked, they're not separate, and that there is this constant dialogue between them that allows us to not only understand others in a deeper way, but also build connection to others. Whether it's the way you breathe or the way you move or the way you hold your face, all of these things shape your internal experience of your external environment. And although Botox may one day be used as a therapy to curb mood disorders, as suggested in this study, really, I come back to actual embodiment and personal intention and the power of who we are. Because if a small injection into a muscle can literally change your brain's emotional activity and the circuitry that's operating within it, imagine what happens when you take time each and every day to program your brain through breathing deeply and consciously, stretching, praying, meditating, connecting to yourself, connecting to something greater than yourself. Imagine the impact of ritualizing your state of being, not just through science, but through a sacred practice. That is what Becoming Superhuman is really all about. And it is about merging science with your soul and using both to live in a more powerful, intentional, and emotionally attuned way rather than disassembling our emotional perceptibility of our brain. So hopefully this brings some light to the effects of this particular drug, but in general, the idea that we are a whole system and you cannot do one thing to one part of your body and not cause an effect in another part. That's just how we are built. That's how we work. I hope you found this insightful and interesting. And if so, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Take care.